All right, I'm joined with Jess from the Wild Femco here. Today we're going to be talking about the Mayan cacao ceremony, as well as any other practices that she's done that have had a real positive effect on people's lives. If you don't mind, could you introduce yourself, kind of why you got into this, um, why you enjoy it, and kind of what changes you've seen in people's lives through it?
Sure. So my name's Jess Cartwright, and I'm based out of Bozeman, Montana. And I've been teaching yoga for over 14 years, but really dabbling in a lot of different, not forms of spirituality, but dabbling in spirituality in a lot of ways to sort of access our deeper inner selves. And I've also traveled throughout a lot of Latin America and quite a bit of South America. And when I lived down there, I was really blown away by how connected a lot of people are to their ancient beliefs. And I found it really fascinating that a lot of the people who were the most religious were just also the most spiritual, and they were really connected to the land. And so when I traveled, I always made a really big effort to connect to the local practices and how people revere different plants and medicines. And I had the opportunity to go to Lake Atitlan in Guatemala about 4 years ago now. And I had never done a cacao ceremony. I sort of wanted to wait to learn about it a little bit more from source and really connect to the people who have revered this practice for a long time. And I was lucky enough when I was down there to meet with a lot of local Mayans and meet with people who worked with Mayans and lived on the lake. If you don't know Lake Atitlan, it's considered one of like the spiritual vortexes of the world and a natural sort of wonder. And the Mayans have revered it and used it for millennia, and there's actually 21 or more different Mayan dialects spoken around the lake still to this day, which I think is just so fascinating and so cool. And
Wow,
the Mayans have been, yeah, it's so neat.
that's
They've
cool.
been through so much, but they still have connection to a lot of these practices that have been sacred to them for a long time. And I originally went down there to study with the Mayan midwives, who are really well known across the globe for their birth practices and studies. And then the cacao was something that ended up being a big part of our daily practice while we were there, and I really fell in love with. And I just started to learn how to invite that medicine in and treat it as plant medicine, something that's more elevated than just drinking like cocoa. So essentially, cacao, what it is if you think about the plants, it gets fermented, and then typically it gets roasted, sort of like coffee, and then it gets condensed into this beautiful sort of brick or pulverized material. And what they do is they press that, and on one side you get raw cacao powder, and on the other side you get cocoa butter. And so what's really beautiful about drinking the ceremonial grade cacao is that it's the whole plant still together. So you have all of the beautiful benefits of the cacao, but then the healthy fats from the cocoa butter, the vitamins and minerals. It has a ton of magnesium. So one of the more like I guess scientific benefits is that it does have a ton of vitamins and minerals, and it has really high magnesium content. And so the Mayans that I worked with, especially, we were focused on women's health, and they really used it for any time there was pain, anything to do with cycling, just anything time that you needed to connect to spirit, but also the pain portion, because when we're going through pain, the magnesium can really help us to feel calm and centered and relaxed. And
Yeah.
so that in and of itself, from the like, elemental or physical standpoints, I think is really eye-opening for a lot of people. And it's like, oh, we crave chocolate for a reason. But this pure form just really takes it to the next level. And yeah, I noticed, like, for me, when I first started drinking cacao, it just felt like, oh, like really grounded and like maybe everything's gonna be okay after all. And I've had so many women that I've mostly shared this experience with women, but I've also drank cacao with men. And but I just tend to focus on supporting a lot of the female experience. And I find that it just really is grounding and anchoring, and at the same time really uplifting, which is the definition of an aphrodisiac. And I don't know that cacao is considered an actual aphrodisiac, I'm not sure, but I always found that so fascinating. Like, we're trying to get to this place where we're relaxed yet energized at the same time. And so we're not like manic and we're not depressed. We're not somewhere in between. We're just somewhere in between that feels really grounded and really good. And cacao does that for me every time. It reminds me of like why I love to be alive. It makes me feel connected to these places that I've been fortunate enough to drink cacao, the experiences I've had using cacao to connect to other people. And I find when I do bigger ceremonies with people and we start with cacao, it really creates such a safe space and an invitation for them to drop in and be a little bit more open to trying different things because it feels familiar and yet different. And I've had so many
Mm.
people tell me like, this is literally the best thing I've ever put in my mouth or ever tasted. And I think it's because there is, for me, when I make it, so much reverence and where I buy it, but then also just, it's imbued with these really sacred energies. And that can be depending on your experience, where you get it, all of these different things. But to me, it's just brought such an uplifting and grounding and like heart centering energy into my life. And I've even had one client, I took her to meet these women in Guatemala that we get the cacao from last year. And it was like the lifetime trip for her. And she was so excited. And she just cried meeting these women. And she goes, I was losing my will to want to be alive. I was in a really
Wow.
low place. I was really dark. There wasn't much that felt good in my life. I was hanging on to the sessions that I would do with Jess to like get through my weeks. But then as soon as she brought me cacao and we started drinking it together, like I remembered that there's so much goodness in life and I want to be here for it. And so for
Wow.
her to meet these women who provided that for her, like it's such a different experience than just drinking any old average thing. And so when I drink it, I do try to bring in some of the ritual, bring in some of the connection to really make it feel like something different and something special. And it's always taken me there. That's sort of the rundown of how I got exposed to it and what I've used it for. And to me, it just creates, this like wonderful connective open so that when people do go into the deeper journeys with it, that they feel supported and nourished in it instead of it feeling like sort of scary and out of body. Like it keeps you in your body, which is really the goal, right? Like we want to be up here and in our third eye and in our crown and have all this enlightenment. But the real spiritual journey, in my opinion, is to make it manifest, which means to make it real and to bring it down and bring it lower and make it a part of our lives. And for me, cacao really helps me to stay in that place instead of just like living in the ethereal all the time, but not being able to bring it tangibly into how that relates to my day to day, which, is the real practice.
Oh, that's fascinating. So kind of the physical drinking of it kind of brings in the kind of the spirituality of it. It's something tangible you can touch, and whereas something just like meditation or any of these other practices, you're not as exposed to a kind of a physical totem or something to kind of
Totally.
bring it in. That's
Yeah,
fascinating.
that's a really good point, because to me, like a big part of what I like to invite in when I work with people or for my own practice is like, how can we invite in the senses? Because then it becomes something that's more accessible. Like I used to do sound healing a lot for people and they would respond so well because sound's familiar with for us. It's already
Mm.
easy for us to tap into it and relax when we hear a great song or, something like that. And it doesn't feel, like you're in this isolation chamber of just like, oh my God, I'm here in my thoughts, but like I don't have an anchor point. And yeah, that's such a good way to put it. Like it just is inviting in the sense of smell, the sense of taste, the sense of touch with the heat. And so it really, when we can make our spiritual practices a sensory experience, I find that we welcome them in a lot more. And then we feel safe. And then we also carry them with us instead of it being this like isolated, removed thing. And how do we integrate? And yeah, there's something else I was going to say about that. But yeah, I think that is a big part of it, is just having that sort of sensory experience. And then for me too, I didn't say this earlier, but anytime I'm feeling weary, I turn to cacao, like weary with the state of the world, weary with what's going on, like, lacking energy, lacking life force. I drink cacao and, this is a bit far stretch, but I think part of it is that like I'm reminded of the Mayans and like how much they've been through. They've been through so much strife and so much struggle, and they're still here. They're still connected to their land, to the earth. And I think that brings me back to a sense of hope and connectivity that's really, really powerful.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, a lot of these practices, I think, unfortunately, they've kind of been tossed into the realm of nonsense, and oh, it's all placebo and that kind of stuff. But with the Mayan cacao ceremony, I did a little bit of research on it, but yeah, 600 BC, I believe, is how long some of this stuff they think has been around. So very, very long time.
Wow.
And, it's, they just keep doing it, for thousands of years until the conquistadors came in and changed things, to put it mildly. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I feel like with the Mayan cacao ceremony, it's obviously a large part of it is the spirituality, but I feel like a large part of it is also just what's in it, like whether it's the theobromine or the magnesium, like you were talking about. And a lot of these things, like the magnesium does affect the mind heavily. And so you have a lot of receptors in your brain for magnesium, especially. And so if you're in a state of mind that is kind of spiritual, you're opening your third eye, as you said, I think these things can be way more beneficial, right? Whether you're doing smudging or these other things where it does kind of open your mind up and you're in a state where you can actually receive these things, right? Where you can receive the magnesium or the theobromine or the vitamins or things like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think what's interesting, I don't want to get into a discussion of, which God is right or if there is a God or something like that. But I think our nature requires some sort of spirituality to open up and just to be healthy and happy and all of that. And so, me coming from the scientific world as I have a PhD in pharmacology, um, I did a lot of biochemistry too. But I think as a scientist, we really push that out of our lives. And I think it's a real problem. And
Mm-hmm.
just, we're almost trained to do that, right? It's like, oh, there's no evidence for that. Throw it in the trash, or, it's something that can't be studied. Don't worry about it. And I feel like, in the modern world, especially, and not just scientists, a lot of that stuff gets thrown to where it shouldn't be. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really appreciate people like you who kind of keep this stuff alive. And even for me, kind of a former skeptic, and you just, you know it's real. You feel it. You've seen it
Mm-hmm.
affect other people's lives, and you know, you, you just kind of get the haters out and say, I'm going to do it. What you
Yeah,
talked a little.
my hater blockers are pretty strong. It's funny that I forget that you're a scientist because sometimes I get so frustrated. I'm like, why do we need science to prove what we've known for millennia? And people like they have to make sense of it in their brain, which I get. And obviously, like I'm not a science hater. Like science is beautiful, but I'm like,
Right.
can't we also trust, in these traditions that are passed down and like receive them without our brain having to figure them out? Because that's what, like you said, often ends up blocking us from receiving them in the
Yeah.
first place.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think one of my mentors, Jessica Ash Wellness, she first labeled it or like called it the spiritual safety net. And I think that we really need that because it's really hard to take a big risk. It's really hard to be vulnerable. It's really hard to do something big in life if we don't trust that there's going to be something there to catch us.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, I think having that is really powerful and beautiful and allows us to go into these realms that aren't linear and are more expansive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think um I was I need to I keep referencing this book that I read, but I can't remember the name. So maybe I'll edit the name in later. But basically, it said like the imagination is what really separates us from the animals, right? Like our ability to imagine things, and it kind of opens up the mind. And like the irony is when we're kids and we have such a vivid imagination, and it really opens us up to new and interesting things. But when we get older, when we need it the most, that's kind of when we suppress it, and when we can use it, it's like use our imagination. And as far as spirituality is concerned, I think we do need to not push it away. And um, like I said, there's lots of different religions out there, and different spiritual practices and things like that. And they've been around for thousands of years. And so we do really need to understand why our ancestors did that, why it was beneficial, maybe not necessarily argue over whose spirituality is right or
Yeah.
whose religion is right, but just argue that, that's an innate need and it's something that we should embrace and kind of explore. And that's where we can really innovate. And I feel like science could especially use that kind of stuff because it helps you to think outside the box. It helps you to kind of harness what it means to be human, embracing your spiritual side. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of one of the major points of this podcast is I really feel like um, that's something we're losing, right? With
I feel
all
like
of science and sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. With all the science, I feel like religion often ruins spirituality too. And I hate to say that, but I feel like
No, it's true.
when we hand over our power to someone else and say, "You carry all the power, tell us what to do," like that is the moment to me we've lost our true inner essence of spirituality. When we look to someone to help guide us and bring us closer to our truth, I think that feels really good. But I think for me, like I feel repulsion to even honestly be in most churches because there's so much shame and guilt that is imbued with a lot of those, and that is the opposite to me. So I think like the overall community, the rituals, like I think those are so important and so beautiful, but as soon as it turns into, yeah, I'm right, you're wrong, or this is the way to do it, or let me tell you how to live your life because I know better than you, then that's an instant hard no for me.
Yeah.
And same with science, like sometimes there is gray room and it's not, and I think they're very different, but I think those are just things that people are really confused nowadays because they don't understand how to have spirituality if it's not within the form or context of a religion. But there's so much more out there and we just often don't really know where to look.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think there's a lot of spiritual practices that have actually been lost to time. And I don't want to blame the Christians too much for this, but I mean, I guess I should. They've basically supplant whatever was there, and there's all these ancient practices, rituals, all these things that people have been doing for thousands of years, which have real modern day benefits. Whether it's
Mm-hmm.
breathing or yoga or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there needs to be a resurgence of a lot of that stuff rather than
Mm-hmm.
it just being kind of tossed into the bin of history. A lot of these things developed over who knows how long, right? Way
Mm-hmm.
before recorded history, and people did them, and it was beneficial, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of came with the whole package of being human, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I agree. I think religion turns people off to spirituality sometimes, and I think a lot of the religions are actually coming around and seeing that. Not
I
using
hope
it
so.
so much as a method of control and kind of using it to tell people what
Unite.
to do. Yeah, unite. Using it
Mm-hmm.
as I mean, in some ways, it's beneficial. I don't know if you've heard of that book *Sapiens*, but that was kind of the belief is the shared mythology is what kind of really brought us together as a species, and
Hmm.
it has a time and a place, but it just like anything else, such a powerful tool can be used for evil. And when it starts, like you said, just controlling people with guilt and
Mm-hmm.
not letting them find whatever spirituality or whatever works for them, I think that's when it's problematic. So
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
so um I want to take an opportunity to ask you about some of the other practices because I saw you do a lot of
The
different things.
plethora.
The plethora,
Yeah.
which is awesome. No, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's so great. Besides the Mayan cacao ceremony, what practice, ritual, whatever, have you seen that's really benefited people the most, if you had to pick one?
Mm. I guess it's a multi-layered answer, but just finding spaces for people to drop in, like connecting to nature. To me, the breath is the main gateway, the main portal to the other layers. So if we think about it like with the five koshas of yoga, we have the five layers of our being. The first being the physical, the second being the breath, the emotional, the energy body. the third being the mental, the fourth being the belief layer, the fifth being the bliss layer, and then underneath all those layers is simply existing. And so the breath is one of the few systems in the body that's autonomic and automatic. It will work for us, but we can also use it to alter things. And so when we start to just notice the breath, I think it's that first gateway into noticing those other layers and realizing that not only can we notice them, but we can actually affect or alter them. And so to me, like if we can make the breath and the experience feel as comfortable as possible, like I guess that's what I was going to say earlier about cacao too, is I think we're really lacking a lot of pleasure in our lives. We do a lot
Mm.
of things that are like maybe gluttonous or whatever, like, but true pleasure and a sensory delight, I think we're lacking. And so I think we need to create a lot more spaces where they feel pleasurable. We feel invitational to them. And then we can really go into those deeper layers. For me, touch has been a huge part of my practice. And I think that can bring up a lot of things for a lot of people. But I think as humans, we're really lacking physical touch and connection with each other. And even just a gentle like hand on the shoulder can remind you like, I'm safe, I'm here. It's okay for me to feel what I'm feeling or to go a little bit further. So breath, touch, the sensory. And then I have really recently gotten into I do a lot of like guided journeying, and I originally started doing that through the practice of yoga nidra. I think everyone should have a practice of yoga nidra in their lives. Are you familiar with yoga nidra?
I'm not. No, please
Okay.
expound.
Yeah. So yoga nidra, I learned in my teacher training. And it's a lot of times translated as the yoga of sleep, but I've actually really prefer the translation of the yoga of burden-free rest. And it's basically trying to get us into this place where we're so relaxed, but we're awake. So we're in tapping into the subconscious, but we're consciously aware of it.
Mm.
And it's this sort of script of like, bringing awareness to different parts of the body. There's a lot of different approaches that people will use for their yoga nidra practices. But for me, it was really what allowed me to go so much deeper into my meditations and truly understand what was underneath everything. So underneath the conscious, oh, I'm aware of this, or I think that, it was like, what's really my subconscious feeling right now or wanting to release right now or yearning for. And it's really hard to tap into that sometimes, but I found I've guided yoga nidra since I think 2010, and I still use it in every practice that I do because it's just a way for us to tap in and go way deeper but be aware of it. So sometimes like we'll have this deep experience, but and even if you fall asleep, like it's still working, but like
Hmm.
how often are we in a place of burden-free rest where we feel so safe and secure that we can explore those deeper parts of ourselves and know that it's okay whatever comes up. And so that's a lot of what, when I tell people I'm doing like guided journeying, it's really responding to what they're telling me they're going through and creating a journey for them through yoga nidra that works with what they're needing, but it's creating a safe space within that we know is always there. It's creating an intention, and then it's dropping into all of those deeper layers. And it's a really powerful way to have people tap into their intuition without even realizing it. Like I'll take them on a journey. Imagine walking through a beach and, bring all the senses in, and what would you see? And then you see something in the water, and what is it? What's that symbol? What does it have for you? And people who are like not even necessarily that tuned into their intuition, like they see something. There's something there. There's something that comes through, and then afterwards, it's like I don't make a big deal of it. Like, oh, well, what did you notice? And it's usually exactly the message that they need to hear. And they didn't
Wow.
even realize that they were like so strongly using their own intuition to get there. And then, so that like type of guided inquiry, I think is really, really powerful. Again, because it's very invitational as well. And then also, I've sort of translated that more recently into Akashic record realms. So the Akasha is basically like all of, it's like the soul records of every living thing that's ever existed, places. And that is something that is very, very, very powerful for me personally in my life. And I don't necessarily outright share as much about because it feels so sacred to me. But
Mm.
when I take clients on, these journeys, now I'm often sort of tapping into this Akashic record realm. And a lot of people tap into what they call the Akashic for a lot of past life stuff. We all have different extrasensory perceptions, psychic abilities that are stronger than others. And mine's not very visual. I'm a feeling and I'm a knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I often just get like insights into like, wow, this is where this person's really struggling. And what do we need to rewrite? What narrative do we need to rewrite? What do we need to forgive? What do we need to release in the body? Whatever it is, so that we can move forward without carrying that heaviness and that weight. And that is such a powerful practice. And I think, you can go all the way to the Akashic realm of it, but you can start with a yoga nidra script, even on like a free meditation app, and make sure it's a voice you like. I've done yoga nidra practices for an hour where I'm just like, oh my God, where was I? That felt like 2 minutes. And then
Wow.
I've done them where I'm like, oh my God, will this person stop talking? Like, I'm so over it. But to me, that's part of the practice. And but I do think it's important to find someone who's sort of like, oh, I like their voice. Like, this feels really good, because there's a lot of different modalities. But, going from the Nidra, they even have ones for like veterans and people who have PTSD. So it's like very straightforward, not a ton of woo. And then all the way to the Akashic realm, I think having some sort of practice of inner inquiry, and not just the noticing of the meditation, but the really like being guided into those deepest subconscious, intuitive knowing layers of ourselves. Like, that I think is the most transformative thing that I've had in my life, and that I've offered to a lot of the clients that I do. And usually I use Cacao first, and then I sort of do that journey to be like, okay, like, you're
Oh,
safe, this is good, and then let's go deeper.
kind of prepare them for what's about to come. No,
Totally.
I
And
like
like
that a lot.
cushions, bolsters, like, let's be comfortable, let's be relaxed, let's put an eye pillow, let's have a blanket, like, yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, it sounds like you've kind of tapped into a way for people to find their own intuition that's a little bit more powerful than the traditional methods of, basic meditation or even prayer. A lot of people, I'd say most religions have some form of prayer, and where they kind of, they're calling on a higher power, and they're looking for intuition, they're looking for guidance and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And so I think with the cacao and with the getting the person comfortable and then guiding them through their own mind, maybe they can find the answer that they're looking for, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
maybe even open up a part of their brain that hasn't been opened up before. And then they can expand their consciousness. I know they've done a lot of stuff with psychotropic research showing that it actually does open up different parts of your brain. Though for some people, maybe that wouldn't be good, but for others, it
What
can
is
it can be
psychotropic?
useful.
Like,
Psychotropic, like LSD
psychedelics?
or
Okay.
psychedelics. Yeah, just another name for psychedelics. But
I don't know. I mean, I personally have used psilocybin quarterly every year for the past 15 years. I don't know. To me, it's also been a big part of my journey. That I think for me, though, I would start with like the yoga nidra, the journeying, and then go to those places. But it connects me to that natural world and that intuition in ways that are just total resets. Again, the like, oh my God, I love to be alive, this is amazing, earth is amazing, like, it's so good here. And I use that to connect to truth in some of the deepest ways that I've ever found. So I do
yeah,
find that really powerful too, but I don't think that it's necessarily necessary. I just have used that as a part of my personal practice, for sure.
yeah. No, I love it. I think depending on the person, it can be a huge help,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, like I said, a lot of this stuff kind of gets pushed into the bin. But I feel it's actually one of the most, if not the most important thing, believe it or not, because like you said, if it's renewing people's will to live, then what could be more important than that? Like
Absolutely.
keeping supporting your families and going to work and basically and enjoying those things, right? Not just drudging through them. You're actually
Mm-hmm.
opening up the person's consciousness and changing it so that they actually are happy and they want to live. And I think that's what a lot of these ancient religions and some of the more modern ones, they acknowledge that too. They're like, well, we've got something here, let's organize it, and people are going to keep coming every week, and
Mm-hmm.
let's keep using that. But yeah, like you said, a lot of times it becomes corrupted and they kind of lose their way, and then you get these reformations, right, with like the Protestants and the Great Awakening in the
Mm-hmm.
New England states. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm surprised that a lot of these spiritual practices aren't more popular. And I think one of the biggest problems is marketing and branding. And unfortunately, I know nothing about that, but I think it does just need to be out there more. I don't know how to do that. Like I said, I'm a man of science or whatever, but
I think that's
um,
great. People want, I think they can relate to you well through that, you know?
yeah, my one of my goals in all of this is to um, I don't know, use my credentials, I guess, and just kind of show that, this stuff is not, it's not just black magic fake stuff. It's actually, it can change your life,
That's
and
so
you
powerful.
shouldn't just throw it in the garbage. And since the beginning of recorded history, and obviously way before recorded history, it's been absolutely necessary. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, keep on doing what you're doing. I think
Thank you.
I think the world could use about 100,000 more of you out there.
Thank you. And yeah, we
But
do. I mean, I'm very not scientific in so many ways. And I think we need more of what you're doing too. And for people to make it feel like not, or just to trust it a little bit more in whatever way that looks like for them, I think is
yeah,
huge. So yeah.
no, I agree. And like you were saying, unfortunately, a lot of people have seen the dark side of spirituality, the dark side of religion, whether it's, a controlling pastor or priest or something, or scam artists or something,
Hmm.
people just trying to make money or something. And I think that if people gave it a chance and really looked at it and realized, hey, this is important as breathing or whatever for
Hmm.
your happiness, then I think people would be a lot better off in their
Yeah.
lives.
One other thing that I just want to add as food for thought there is, have you ever heard of the witch wound?
I haven't.
I think it relates a little bit more to women, but I think it's just sort of, you're like, what happened? Where did all of this go? Like, we need 100,000 more of you. It's this idea that, like, not too long ago, women especially, but all genders were persecuted for this knowledge. And we've created this real fear based society. Even me growing up in the South,
Mm.
like, that's still so entrenched in religion. And there's a, like, oh my God, if you show that you're doing this, I'm going to tell on you and you're not safe
You
and you
get
can't
burned
do
alive.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't people like being like, "Oh, like I'm raising spirits." It was women who used plant medicine. It was midwives. It was just anyone who knew anything about herbs in the natural world. And I still think we're really coming back from that. And I think that people did keep it alive in some ways, but a lot of ways we lost it. And we do need to start asking our elders like for information or if they have it, or being curious, going to these cultures and having a mutual respect and reverence for what they can still offer, and give back to them as well. And I just think that that is a part of it. It's just this idea that for a long time that we had to really hide those parts of ourselves. And even to this day, like, I feel so much more emboldened now, but I used to not talk about this stuff with anyone because it was so special to me. And I know so many people would just write it off or woo. And now I'm like, I could give a fuck what you say. Like, how happy are you?
Yeah, right.
How is your life?
Oh,
But
yeah.
I think there's still just this like idea that that's wrong, and especially if you're religious, like this is right and that's wrong, and I'm gonna punish you. Potentially you're going to be harmed if you talk about it. And so that's why I try to be as vocal as possible, because I know that that's not my case right now, and so many people are thirsty for it. But I think that's a big part of why this got really pushed back, and is a struggle that we all need to work to sort of bring back up again.
Yeah. Oh, that's a very good point. That totally happened. Where,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, all that stuff got squashed, and it's really cool. You travel around and kind of pick up on different cultures and traditions, and kind of keep them alive, and don't let them
Taboo.
go into the ash bin of history. Would if if it's not too much to ask, could you share one of those experiences where you kind of went to a different country, a different culture, and it's, one of the more profound spiritual experiences that you had with those people?
Mm. You know, both of them, sort of, the two that come to mind, one was on Lake Titicaca. I went to the Isla del Sol, which is what they called the Incan Island of the Sun Gods. And I had just a really eye-opening experience. I used San Pedro, which is like the South American sort of peyote, and there's no electricity there, there's no transportation there. So like you are just in the middle of freaking like time warp, it feels like. And the connection that I felt there is something that I carry with me for the rest of my life. But a more specific formal experience was definitely this last time that I went to Guatemala, and I brought a group of women down there for a retreat. And I work with Maya Moon Cacao. It's these women who support single mothers on like Atitlan, and it's this group of sisters who started this company, and one of them is called Mama Cacao, and she really makes the medicinal cacao there, ceremonial. But then they have the shaman that they work with who does the cacao ceremony, and I didn't really know what to expect. I had never done that more formal ceremony, and but I knew it was going to be big. And we started the ceremony, and speaking, so Spanish is their second language too, because their first language is the Mayan dialect. And she's just like, one of the first things that she's starting the fire, and she goes, "Who here works with this medicine?" And the gal who was like, set it up for us was like, "Jess does, like, she works with this." And she was like, "Okay, like, I didn't expect this." And she sort of told me later, like, a lot of times people come down there and it's almost like conquistador energy. Like, I'm just going to mark that off my list, like, did that, versus like genuinely wanting to connect and really have openness and reverence for what is being offered, instead of just, I have this expectation it's going to be met, and as soon as it's met or not met, I'm out of here, and so I think that was so powerful for me, like, and I think that's something we all need to keep in mind. But I've worked with this, I just worship, these women who are so sacred without even realizing it. And she basically was like, whatever you feel, whatever comes up, like, let it happen, don't hold it down. And so this was, we did this under a Mayan altar that had been for millennia, like, used as a Mayan altar, and that's where they make their cacao, and we had a fire under it, and just felt so sacred to even be invited in that space. And some of the women I brought, have a lot of trauma that they're going through. And before we even drank cacao, I mean, I think we drank cacao like 2 hours into it. We were honestly just sitting there, and she was taking like big bundles of tobacco and blowing them over our head to see what the smoke told her. And like, one of the women started throwing up, within 5 to 10 minutes. And she was the one who was going through the most trauma. And I know
Oh,
that sounds like sort of awful. And I've never really done ayahuasca. Like, I'm not like, oh, we need to but she was just where she had been feeling her trauma in her stomach for so many years. Instantly, she started feeling that, and it started coming out and coming up and
wow.
releasing. And, this is just with like a little bit of tobacco smoke on her head. Um, and we went through this whole long, elaborate ceremony, but she really used the smoke that was her elements. And that's what told her these incredibly profound and deep insights into every single one of us and our lives, even to the
Wow.
point of like physical ailments to, spiritual, emotional, mental. And I think, again, like, one gal didn't have as big of an experience, but I think she's just more skeptical and closed off. And like, I think that's a hard thing for people, because the more you're sort of like, prove it to me, the more you cut everything off. And then it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
even
You
for
don't
me,
get
I'm like, I'm
anything out
not
of
here
it.
to prove anything to you. Like, if you're
Yeah.
not already open, like, I'm not going to, you go look at some science and whatever. But
It's not going to work. Yeah.
yeah,
No, totally.
but it was just really transformational for all of us. And what I received from that, like, my life is forever changed physically. I feel so much better, like, with what she supported me with, energetically, emotionally. Like, she nailed every single bit of it on the head. And we drank the cacao, not as an afterthought, but like, yes, that was the focal point of what brought us together, but it was using all of these other things, and candles, and throwing stuff in the fire, and following her prescribed rituals that took hours, but like, were, as what allowed everything to sort of open up and create this like vortex of openness, where we could all receive exactly what we were needing to hear in this big pivotal life transition moment. And then, I think it was like they say with a lot of things, like the setting, the who you're with, all of that. And it was just, it's hard to describe in a lot of ways. And it's so interesting that to me, the cacao was even like, a small part of it, but it was the ritual, it was her connection, it was her reverence, and it was our openness, that really allowed all of that to transform and take place. And like women releasing years of pent up trauma and really horrible things that have happened, and like hearing like it's over now and it's
Wow.
done and we can move forward and the past is behind you and now there's goodness coming. And like that was just I think that takes a special person to have that channel, and someone who's really made that their life, and also born with that special gift. And yeah, that was one of my most amazing spiritual moments and ceremonies that I've ever gotten to be a part of. It was really powerful.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole act of throwing up and just getting that poison that you've been holding on to you out of your body, kind of like the opposite of the cacao, right? Where it's, you're putting something good in to find fulfillment, and then you're removing something bad to get rid of the negative that's in your life. I think that
Hmm.
that physical connection to something like that is probably extremely helpful with
Totally.
dealing with trauma. And oh, thank you for sharing that. That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
And I just
Yeah.
want to just this like analogy came up for me real quick. Like to me, drinking cacao is like knowing that, for example, running is really good for you or walking, and even if you just go for a 5-minute walk, you're going to enjoy it and get something from it. And then maybe you decide to do like an ultra run or, do this huge experience and you're going to really change your life from it. But like, no matter how you approach it, there's going to be something in it for you that's going to benefit you. And we don't have to go to this extreme to get it. And if we're lucky enough to get that experience, it's amazing. But there's a lot of ways to invite it into your life. And I think it's just the intention that you hold behind it. Because some people, how do I find that? It's like, well, you don't have to. You can buy some ceremonial cacao. You can try it. You can find someone who does these experiences for you. And you can just have this beautiful intention behind it. And that's a lot of what you need.
No, no, that's a good point to bring up. Yeah, they don't need to spend a week in Guatemala necessarily, or 2 weeks
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
these experiences. They can kind of do it themselves at home, or go
Hmm.
to someone like you, and
Hmm.
kind of get that rush and that purge of the mental as well as maybe even physical toxins as well in your body.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Jess. I've really
Thanks.
really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. It was
Maybe we
fun to
can
talk
we
about.
can do it again sometime. Find something else to talk about.
Yeah.
And educate me a little bit more on the spiritual world. Like I said, I'm from a science background, but yeah, I've found what's interesting is like the more you lean into just like strict knowledge and pompousness and that kind of stuff, the unhappier you are. Like, I don't know what it is, but I really do
Totally.
feel like, and I think a lot of the old religions, they're kind of, I wouldn't say dying, but the control that they've had over people is kind of waning, and there's going to be a lot of fallout. There's going to be a lot of people who are lost souls, and that kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to be a shepherd or anything like that, but I think a lot of people need people like you because, there's not really much of a feather bed, right? It's basically like atheism and
Hmm.
nihilism and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that rarely leads somewhere good. And so I think, maintaining our spirituality, and even in the face of, maybe people leaving abusive religions or things like that, is going to be um, very important, and it's going to keep us going as a species. And like you said, we need this stuff, right? It
Hmm.
resets, it keeps you alive, keeps you happy, keeps you wanting to live. So all right, well,
Yes.
is there any other things you'd like to leave on, or have we covered pretty much everything you wanted to talk about?
I feel like we could talk for hours because I'm like, yes, we've
Yeah.
moved from the Piscean age where one person holds all the power to the Aquarian age where we all have equal access to knowledge,
Right, right.
But yeah, what do we do with it? No, I think just being open and curious and holding things lightly is huge, and having good intentions when you approach this type of things, in terms of like, okay, what's an intention to bring to it? Like, I want to feel connection, I want to feel reciprocity, and then if people are looking for a cacao that they can use, I really love to support the women that I've met who run the company Maya Moon Cacao, and they're Mayan women who live on Lake Atitlan and
Wow.
support single mothers and handicapped youth. And I just have fallen so in love with the work that they do, and I love that it's not like a gringo and a foreigner who's doing that company, which is fine. It's just really supporting the people who have held these customs sacred for a long time, and they do sell their cacao here in the States, so you can get that if you want to try some for yourself at home.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. No, I'll put a link to that down at
Okay,
the
good.
bottom if you send it to me. I'll make sure that
Perfect.
gets out. I'd like to try some. I kind of want to.
Yes.
There's not really any Mayan cacao ceremonies here in Utah, so maybe
Yeah.
I'll get a mini one started using that.
Yeah,
But
totally. Yeah, and then you can just like, to me, I just love to invite in the elements, like, so fire, light a candle, smoke, like smudge, liquid, we have that, like, just invite in all five elements in whatever ways, take a moment to breathe, drink some cacao, and like set an intention and just drop in, and it's lovely. And one last tip that I have, which is sort of minor, is if you get the brick of cacao, I usually cut it with a serrated knife to break it off, or you can get it like, pulverized or whatever. And then a lot of traditions, or like a lot of people in the States nowadays, like, they don't sweeten it, and they only put cayenne pepper to like make the properties really stronger. But like, never have I ever met a native who does that and was like, it has to be so intense and whoa. It's like, no, they add some sweetness. Like, I usually do half water, half milk, some honey. Like, let it be a good experience. Only in the US are we so like aggro that we're like, it has to be so intense. Like,
super
it can be
bitter.
pleasurable.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's my only recommendations if you're making it your house. So.
Sweetening it isn't going to dampen the
No, in
magnesium
fact, I
or the
think that's like,
spirits.
we're trying to get away from harshness and being in our masculine and in our heads. Like, we know what to do, and it's like, oh, just like, what would taste good? What do I feel
Yeah.
intuitively like I want to do, and follow that. So
Enjoy the experience. No, I really like that.
yeah,
I was curious about that actually, like
okay.
how much sweetness or how bitter, or if it mattered as much. But in your experience, it's fine making it palatable.
Yes, I take the taste, and I add honey, and I add usually cardamom and cinnamon, and I just like to make it feel really, really cozy. So
Well, that's
yeah.
great. Thank you for sharing that because I was
Yeah.
curious about that and I forgot to ask it. So
Well, good.
you
I'm
read
glad I brought it up.
you read my mind.
Oh, I'm good at that now. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having
Hey,
me.
oh, thank you. I really, really enjoyed it. We'll have to do it again.
Me too. Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Bye.